Okay, guys, we are moving on today in the next section of our book. Hopefully, you did okay on the quiz, uploaded okay. I'll get that graded, and the solution will be displayed later. Today, we're going to look at area of a circle and area of sectors. So, area of a circle, we already know. You've done that earlier in the year. I think you guys all know that if you have a circle, that if you take the radius of that circle and you square that radius, squaring is not timesing it by 2, is not multiplying it by 2. R times R, you get the formula area equals pi r squared. That's something we all know. Now keep in mind, if you're ever given a circle with a diameter, for instance, in this example, a diameter of 16, if the diameter equals 16, that means the radius equals 8. So in this case, the area would equal pi times 8 squared. Even though this is a simple formula and a very common formula, sometimes guys try to square that pi. That pi does not get squared, only the radius does. So the exact area of this would be 64 pi. And then we would have units squared. We'll look at that a little bit later. Let's say it was inches. We would have square inches. That is the exact area. To get the approximated area, we would actually multiply that into our calculator and use the pi button. Don't use 3.14. 3.14 is rounded. So use the pi button so you get an exact answer. And for this one, it would be 201.06 square inches. This is approximated because we have to round it, okay? Pi is non-terminating, non-repeating decimal. It's irrational. It goes on forever. So this would be exact over here on the left, and that would be approximate. You might also have to work backwards, just like we did last week. In this case, it gives us an area and asks us for a radius. Well, area equals pi times r squared. So if the area is 72, that equals pi times r squared. You'd have to divide both sides by pi. So you have 72 divided by pi equals r squared. And then to get r by itself, you'd have to take the square root of 72 divided by pi. Wait until the final step to put all that in one step in your calculator, in your graphing calculator. And if you do that, you'll get approximately 4.787. So 4.787, one-dimensional here, that would be inches. Okay, now, if you want to do diameter, you would do the same exact process, exactly the same, just times the diameter by 2 to get diameter. So if you ever get a similar question, in this case it would be 9.5746, so 9.575. If you ever get something about diameter, just solve for the radius and then double the radius. Okay, guys, for our next part here, we're going to find the area of a sector. And here's what a sector is. A sector is a part of a circle. You can think of it as like a piece of pizza or a piece of pie, where essentially one side is bounded by an arc. It could be a major arc or a minor arc. Another side is bounded by a radius, and the third side is bounded by a radius. So it's not exactly a triangle, right? If we had a triangle would go straight from R to S. It is actually the region in here. So like a piece of pizza or a piece of pie. The way that you name this is you choose one of the endpoints of the arc, the center of the circle, and the other endpoint of the arc. So you would say sector RPS, or in this case, sector SPR. Okay, so what is the area for that? Well, the area that, since that's just part of a circle, it's based on pi r squared, right? Pi r squared would be the area of the entire circle. But I only want a portion of this circle. And if you remember back to when we did arc length, we just wanted a portion of the circumference. So this formula looks very similar to a formula we did before, where if this is the arc measure, how many degrees that is, I'll abbreviate that with AM, we just take the ratio of the arc measure over 360. In other words, if it was the whole circle, 360 over 360 would be a ratio of 1, right? So we would get pi r squared the whole area. If we wanted, say, half of a circle, say we had exactly a semicircle, well, that's 180. And 180 over 360 would be 1/2 pi r squared. So let's look at a few examples and see how this will play out. It's really nice because, genuinely, guys, you're just using a formula. So I'll write my formula out like this. The sector equals the arc measure over 360 times pi r squared. It's really similar to that arc length formula, only this over here is area. So look, I have a radius, I have my arc measure, and so the sector is going to equal 72 over 360 times pi times 15, which is the radius, squared, right? So what I did in red there is really all you have to look for and all you have to fill in. Now, sometimes when dealing with this fraction and multiplying all this out into one step, sometimes that gets a little messy. So I suggest that you put the fraction into your calculator, and you can either put the fraction in and then see if it reduces nicely. In this case, this one reduces nicely, but it won't always do that. So put that in and then multiply that by your radius squared. And what you'll get for this particular case is you'll get 45 times pi. You do not need to multiply your answer out. It says there, leave your answers in terms of pi. And since this is centimeters, this will be centimeters squared. That'll be centimeters squared. Okay, on the back here, guys, you won't always be given a picture. But guess what? And normally I tell you to draw a picture, and you could draw a picture here if you wanted to. You could say, hey, look, that's 45 degrees. It's got a radius of 4 inches. But since it's just a formula, since the sector is just arc measure over 360 times pi times the radius squared, if I can just identify what the radius is and what the arc measure is, then that's all I really care about. I don't even really need to draw the picture. You may, if it helps you visualize it, but you don't have to. So in this case, I end up getting 2 times pi inches squared when I put that in my calculator. Put this in your calculator first. That actually would reduce to 1/8, right? And this is pi, and this is 16, and 1/8 times 16 is 2. So doing it by hand, that's how I get it, but you may use your calculator. All right, let's do a few more examples here. And again, guys, it's just about identifying the radius and the arc measure. This one's a little different because they give us the arc measure and the central angle. Remember, the central angle and the outside arc measure are the same. So this would be 90 over 360 times pi times 4 squared. That ends up being 4 times pi. I don't have units here. Let's call all of these inches just so that we have a unit. We can practice units. So that would be 4 pi inches squared. For the example 2, the sector would equal arc measure, which is 36, over 360 times pi times 6 squared. This ends up being, well, this right here reduces to 1/10, and 1/10 of 36, this would be 3.6 times pi inches squared. If they asked for that exactly, if it was an ACT question, they asked for it exactly, you could then do 3.6 times pi to get 11.3097 square inches, right? So this is an approximation, whereas what I've circled in red here is exact. Sometimes, guys, you have to combine a few areas here. Again, it's the same formula. A sector equals the arc measure, which in this case isn't 45, it's not 90, it's 45 plus 90. So 135 over 360 times pi times 2 squared. So when you do 135 over 360, you actually would get 3/8 times pi times 4. And 4 times 3/8 is 12/8, which is really just 1.5 pi, or you could even say 3/2 pi. Either one of those is an acceptable answer. And let's put some units on there. Just put units on there. That would be your exact answer. Last but not least, sometimes you're given an arc measure that isn't the one you want. You've got to do a little bit of math to figure it out. I want this arc measure here, okay? So for this one, the sector is going to equal the arc measure, which is not 72, right? This is a straight line. Straight line, a linear pair equals 180. So this is actually 108 in here, because together 108 and 72 equal 180. So it would be 108 over 360 times pi times, be careful here, the radius isn't 10. The radius is only half that, right? 10 is the diameter. It goes all the way across. So it would be pi times 5 squared. So when I put all this in my calculator, this ends up being 3/10 times pi times 25. And so that would be 75/10 times pi, 75/10 times pi, which is just 7.5 pi. Or if you left it with a fraction, you could say 15/2 pi or 7.5 pi. Again, if you have units, inches squared, inches squared. Hope that helps, guys. That's all we're doing today. Sectors and circles. Sometimes you have to work backwards, but for the most part, it should be pretty easy. Have a good day.